Servant Leadership, our district-wide implementation plan by Jose Luis Mejia, Brian Miller, and Ryan Hayes. In the following district-wide implementation plan, we'll produce an introduction to guide us through the process. We'll have an understanding of what the foundation is for servant leadership for our district-wide implementation plan, the process and implementation slides that will guide the ultimate implementation of servant leadership from the top all the way to the bottom, a little bit of a timeline as far as when these activities can be done, the evaluation and monitoring process, and outcomes and goals. Our process for implementing servant leadership into the life of our district is a result of adapting research and best practices. To develop servant leadership, it requires for the process to change the mindset of everyone and change the current culture. It parallels most leadership training programs. It includes the dissemination of the servant leadership model from a top-down hierarchical approach, which most districts implement. Change will need to occur with top leadership first and then be passed down to their followers, who by definition are leaders on their own respected campus. To establish a servant leadership foundation as a district-wide process, we need to understand the antecedents. What led us to select servant leadership as the most effective model? To understand and implement servant leadership behaviors, in other words, emphasizing care for others and not self, and then ultimately developing outcomes that will produce results for everyone in the organization. The following graph shows the dissemination of servant leadership from a top-down approach. It is important that people engaged in the servant leadership process to be fully convinced, monitor improvement, and change their behaviors. The top-down establishment of servant leadership will facilitate buy-in for change and for future implementation success at the campus level. This approach also guarantees that servant leadership is rooted in accountability from the top all the way to the bottom leadership circles. Let's review the graph. At the top, we have our superintendents who establish the servant leadership foundation and pass it down to their followers. In other words, the department leaders. Department leaders, in essence, create systems for training and implementing servant leadership. They model servant leadership for their followers, who are the campus principals. The campus principals emulate and develop servant leadership systems within their own campus. They model for their followers, who are the teachers, students, and parents. At this stage, it is more individualized to the campus level needs. Following this approach guarantees buy-in, follow-through, and the emphasis of caring for others. To guarantee success, the following components for implementing servant leadership have to be implemented. We can call them servant leadership core values that stem from establishing a foundation or philosophy of what servant leadership is. Developing a growth mindset that involves all the stakeholders investing in human capital and care for others. Then establishing systems for trainings, observations, and coaching that ultimately lead to the evaluation process. All of these core values will need to be coached and guided by servant leaders that are currently utilizing it in the district. In other words, learn by doing. We'll break down the following core values in the next slides. Let's review them. 1. Shared vision. 2. Needs determined by stakeholders. 3. Long-term commitments and training. 4. Continuous change and involvement of everyone. Buy-in. 5. Collaboration. Implementing servant leadership. Emphasizing care for others. 6. Factual decision-making based on coaching and evaluation models. 7. Problems are the results of poor system, not people. And 8. Existing resources can improve the system to produce outcomes. The foundation and vision is where we set the standards for servant leadership. The trainings and evaluations will be guided by the philosophy established at this key step. It has to start with understanding the why. In other words, understanding the antecedents that has led us to wanting to implement servant leadership. Organizations need more servant leaders that place priorities on human compassion and can counter the self-serving culture that exists across many organizations. Greenleaf states that servant leadership is needed for the well-being of core values in society. Change can only happen from within organizations. Continuous improvement is a great equalizer of titles, requiring all to be both humble and powerful. When the common goal is to get better, learning occurs collectively from the whole rather from a select few. Ken Blanchard states servant leadership needs to be rooted in the following: establishing clear goals that everyone can follow and rally behind, acknowledging and praising good work, redirecting with supporting guidance when needed to ensure everyone is successful. The next two steps in the process are identifying needs and establishing long-term commitments. This is where we identify the gaps and get collective feedback to establish our servant leadership long-term plan. This can be done through surveys that gather information on how the organization feels about servant leadership and at what level are we implementing it. The visual identifies components that must be factored into understanding and establishing long-term commitments. The leader's own heart, characteristics, relationships, required tasks, and the actual process. Servant leadership requires collaboration and continuous change from all stakeholders. These two steps emphasize the importance of human value in the process. People are the main resource of an organization, and it is important for the implementation phase in servant leadership. This establishes buy-in and accountability. Participants must experience some discomfort and healthy friction as they practice servant leadership. Putting others' care as a primary focus can be challenging in education because it is primarily focused on measurable results. The shift from managers to leaders occurs here as leaders utilize resources to support the growth of those around them. The next two steps revolve around solidifying the servant leadership process around decision-making and evaluating systems. Decisions have to be made on establishing a growth mindset and coaching structures. Coaching and observations in the field will help guide the process. This will lead to the identification of what is successful and what isn't. It can allow us to modify plans midway through the implementation process. Let's review the chart below. When we are starting with our antecedents, we are looking at the context and culture, leadership attributes, behavior receptivity. Decision-making and systems fall under the servant leadership behaviors. How are we conceptualizing? How are we dealing with emotional healing? How are we putting followers first? Helping followers grow and succeed, that can be done through coaching and observations. Behaving ethically, empowering others, and creating value for the community. Outcomes, those are in the next following slides. We'll focus on following performance and growth, organizational performance, and societal impact. The last steps in servant leadership process is utilizing resources to produce outcomes. The following results should be attainable if leaders follow servant leadership. They are influencing employees, peers, stakeholders, and community in a positive way. Producing happy employees that in the end can also produce student academic results. High employee engagement will also lead to higher retention and recruitment as well, as more people will want to come into an organization where there's a word of mouth that the leader can be trusted. This can produce excellent district and campus culture. It also enhances the trust that the community has towards its leader. It also develops higher performance and higher evaluation results. In other words, as a servant leader passes on their knowledge to the teachers, those teachers in essence someday can become servant leaders as well. In conclusion, servant leadership is essential for maintaining core values that can make for a better society. It is the focus on human care and not self-gratification. This can be an uphill battle as most organizations are data-driven and expect high profits or academic results that can deviate leaders from implementing servant leadership. The chart below is a servant leadership checklist that can keep us on track. They consist of being self-aware, understanding how to be humble, having integrity no matter what, being results-oriented, and this can be done through clear goals, having foresight of what's to come, listening, this is a major skill. Don't abuse authority. Just because you have the title doesn't give you authority over others. Intellectual authority, you must be a problem solver. Collaboration, working with others is essential because that leads to trust. Must be able to coach others. As we mentioned, a servant leader passes on the knowledge to its followers, so those followers someday can become servant leaders themselves. And then at the end, resolving conflict. Thank you for listening for our presentation, and we hope you have a good evening. Thank you.